latest showdown between the feds and local officials appears to be Penn Station.
All right, the Department of Transportation announcing it's taking control of the overhaul of the transit hub. Fox 5's Jessica Formosa was live at Penn.
So, this building behind me is called Penn Station, and although it's in New York no longer has any control over it, as the Trump administration has taken over the plans to fix this dilapidated eyesore, which is so poorly run. It's sadly been doubling as a homeless shelter for over a decade. And critics say it's about time somebody else was calling the shots in here.
Have you been to Penn Station recently?
It's in my district.
It's a homeless shelter.
It's in my district.
So why are you wasting? You give these speeches, and I just read one where you're like, Trump is bad. By the way, ignore the guy living, under the ATM machine.
The Trump administration is kicking the MTA off the $7 billion Penn Station reconstruction project and giving it to Amtrak, which is federally funded, with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy saying the MTA has a history of inefficiency, waste, and mismanagement.
MTA Chairman and CEO Janno Lieber reacted to the decision, saying, as the major leaseholder in the station, we expect to participate in the redesign.
The plan includes a 250,000 square foot facility that will have more room for passenger circulation, more elevators and escalators, entrances and exits, plus better retail space.
As long as they do what they're supposed to, I don't really mind. Doesn't matter who does it, MTA is not the greatest anyway.
Trump in New York, if you kind of look at his real estate policy in history, this sounds like a really bad idea.
It's the busiest train station in this country. It should be great because this country is great, but it's not. It's filthy, filled with waste.
So now that the president's in charge of Penn Station, some lawmakers want to stop it from being renamed Trump Terminal. But what nobody's talking about is this takeover is going to be the best thing to ever happen to Penn Station, and that is not a joke. But what is pure comedy is that the plans to modernize America's busiest train station were supposed to be handled by the MTA, the same city agency that runs our disgusting subway system, which is rotting from the inside out, yet costs $20 billion a year to keep in the state you see it in right now, making it pretty obvious that whoever runs that place should be fired immediately and definitely shouldn't be in charge of anything else, because they're obviously incapable of completing basic tasks. They can't even get people to pay to use the subway or use the billions they're given to make simple repairs. Yet for some reason, year after year, New York keeps giving the MTA more money based on continued promises of a future subway system that has none of the problems it's had for decades. Like fix perpetually busted escalators, which brings us to the real reason this takeover is the only idea that makes any sense for this place. The dirty secret about Penn Station is that New York City was using it to suck federal money out of the pockets of Americans all over the country, just to waste it the same way they waste everything they get from New Yorkers, who soon may have to pay higher taxes as the MTA is asking for $68 billion to finally make good on years of broken promises, which, as you're about to see, they don't even have the ability to make good on. So as you can see, Penn Station, it's got a lot of people inside of it, but it's also home to a lot of problems. It actually looks better today than it did just a few weeks ago when the temperatures were a little bit lower and when there were unfortunately many more people living inside of the station. Here, you just see people passing through on their way somewhere else. But that could also be because there are now police barricades in places where folks with nowhere to go used to be, which is how the city and the MTA go about fixing most of their problems, by hiding them and moving them somewhere else. But now that the Trump administration has stepped in and taken control of this facility and is actually going to do some good down here, local officials are absolutely furious, secretly.
The Trump administration is kicking the MTA off the $7 billion Penn Station reconstruction project and giving it to Amtrak, which is federally funded, with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy saying the MTA has a history of inefficiency, waste, and mismanagement.
He alone can get
this station built after.
So you just heard it right there. Generations of politicians have failed at fixing this horrific building. I mean, the ceiling above me is about to collapse right now. I don't even know what's holding it together. You've got missing tiles near some of the light fixtures, TV monitors that are improperly installed, and probably cost way too much money to put up there in a place where nobody's even going to look at them. On top of that, there's not enough seating, and it makes you feel miserable down here. And in places where you'd think you'd be able to sit, like on this ledge, you'll find anti-homeless architecture, which wasn't working, so now there are also metal barricades and a rope. And teams of outreach workers, critics say, do more to harass people than actually help them. But the real issue here is the city's been trying for years to improve this place and has failed to do so. Failure which we also see down in the subway system, which they're also in charge of through the MTA. And if the city's MTA can't build and maintain a functioning subway system, why on earth would we trust them to fix this place up?
MTA Chair and CEO Janno Lieber saying in a statement in part, as the major leaseholder in the station, we expect to participate in the administration's and Amtrak's efforts to ensure future plans meet.
Did you see that? Those beautiful graphics show us what we may have to look forward to someday down here. But the city, they want to get their fingers on it so bad, and they're upset that it's been taken away from them, the opportunity to get all that money under the auspices of making improvements to public transportation infrastructure. And you just heard the MTA director saying he hopes he can dictate how this money gets spent. But if he does that, the sticker from Paul's Caramel Macchiato may still be here. It may never disappear. Probably because the MTA itself is one of the biggest financial fraud operations in New York City history. This article details how every time they do anything, it's always a scheme to get their hands on public money and send it into the pockets of well-connected private individuals and businesses. Schemes like spikes on subway turnstiles that don't work and don't convince people to pay to use the train, or expensive subway gates that are supposed to be so easy to use people will decide to pay to use the train, which they aren't doing. But it doesn't stop there. One of the best schemes the MTA's figured out in the subway is that they can constantly talk about how they're modernizing signals so that trains will move faster and be more efficient, something they have an entire webpage dedicated to, which tells us they've been working on this for almost 20 years. And whenever America's pocketbook is open, you can bet the MTA wants to get its little fingers in there, but now they can't.
The MTA's history of inefficiency, waste, and mismanagement also meant that a new approach is needed. Amtrak owns the busy hub, therefore the feds believe it's the right fit to execute a project that's been in the works for years.
So Amtrak owns this station, but somehow the MTA found itself in charge of renovating the whole thing? That definitely sounds like a scam right there. To access America's pocketbook and redistribute that money while accomplishing absolutely nothing. But some of New York's leaders are so upset their opportunity to steal from the public while talking about building a functioning train station is gone that they're getting sidetracked. They've now convinced themselves there's a real possibility this thing could be renamed after a president they don't like, and they're the only ones talking about this. Instead of passing laws that would help the people trying to use this train station or the people who are trying to live in it, unfortunately. Instead, they're just concerned about defeating public enemy number one, which tells you that they probably shouldn't be in charge of anything down here.
Governor Hochul says the takeover is a victory, something she's been insisting should happen. The use of federal funds will save New York taxpayers $1.3 billion.
So the funny thing here is that even the governor of our state knows what a black hole the city's MTA is, who was going to be in charge down here. She doesn't want to give him any more money either. And she knows there's going to be zero return on every cent that gets sent down here. But thankfully, the era of black hole checks that totally disappear and accomplish nothing is over. And the reason this is important is because this project actually has the potential to do a lot of good for public transit in New York. It's not only supposed to redesign this nightmarish station, but it's also going to add rail capacity, as well as stop it from falling down on top of everyone who's in here right now. By the way, we're standing in the newer part of Penn Station right now. You can tell because there's this little box over here that has a blinking light. And it's crazy to think that even though this place is falling apart around us, just like the subway subway system that the same people running one were gonna fix the other. But if it wasn't bad enough that local leaders here are venting their frustration at being taken off the job of fixing this place up, those same leaders are giving us another piece of proof that we can look at today that proves they are totally incapable of doing anything correctly. So here we are at the entrance to the subway where all of the problems with this place begin. Yes, it's got a lot of problems. Trains aren't all that reliable. This place is falling apart too if you take a good look at it. But the real issue is that people don't pay to use the train. And the city wants to spend millions of dollars trying to figure out how to get them to do that without arresting anyone.
Fare evasion on the New York City subway isn't exactly rare or subtle.
People are going to do what they're going to do. It's just mind your business.
The MTA, though, is minding its business and employing new ways to stop people from hopping the turnstiles to avoid paying to ride. Monday, the agency revealed 4 modern fare gate designs that will be tested this fall at 20 stations across the city.
So the city has a ridiculous new plan. Spend untold amounts of money on fancy new gates that theoretically should make a dent in people hopping over these things, but they've already got a perfectly good working solution for that right here. In fact, these bad boys are 30 years old. They work. Look, you cannot get through this thing at all. Ain't nobody getting through that unless they pay. They work, but there's a problem with these. And that problem is that since these already exist, they won't earn or justify any new money being sent to people to come up with a modern version of the same thing, which, by the way, would be installed in an unmonitored subway entry point. It's gonna look something like this, but New York is a city of savages. You're gonna need something better than an unmonitored gate in a location nobody watches to get people to pay for the train. And that means anything that gets put here, if it's not one of these guys, isn't gonna do anything. But as smart and practical as it would be to install more of these things, even they have a weakness.
They use the most modern sensor, object detection, and machine learning technology to open and close only for fare-paying passengers.
The MTA has already been testing other strategies, like adding so-called fins.
Stop it right there. Did you see that? The camera just showed someone using the emergency gate to get inside the subway. The emergency gate is also a problem, and if you're not gonna keep an eye on your subway by watching who goes in and who comes out to make sure people pay, people are always gonna be able to get in that way. And what this reveals is how absolutely stupid it is to spend money fixing a problem that is unsolvable. Unsolvable by virtue of the city's unwillingness to crack down on those who break the law, even if it's a small law. And the reason that's a problem is because the subway isn't able to fund its own existence. And whenever it needs more money to fix itself, which is what our leaders keep telling us they need more money for, the money's gotta come from somewhere, and now it doesn't look like it's gonna come from the people who ride the train. No, instead it looks like businesses are gonna have to pay more taxes, which means hiring less people or giving out less raises. Everyone's gonna take a pay cut because of this. All while the city keeps dumping money into the pockets of well-connected contractors to install contraption after contraption that is supposed to make this place profitable and never seems to be able to do so. Which reveals that on the one hand, we're wasting money while at the same time we're asking for more of it, saying that we don't have enough for some reason that we just can't seem to figure out. It's also important to note that any newfangled contraption that the city wants to roll out would conceivably be installed in a terminal like this where people are just jumping the train right in front of me and I'm down here with a camera. Look at this. There's no station booth anywhere. This is entirely unmonitored. It's well lit. The trains are right there. People are just popping and going right in. There's no accountability for these decisions, and that's the real problem.
Some daily riders like Lenneth Oliver think new, taller gates would make a big difference.
I doubt that you'll leap that high.
The NYPD has also stepped up its enforcement and says summonses doubled last month for fare evasion. But the long-term goal is...
So we don't need to hand out summonses for fare evasion. People don't always pay those, and of course somebody passing through our city or our country illegally isn't gonna pay something like that. That's not a real solution, which is why it isn't stemming the tide whatsoever. You'd have to give out so many summonses that the entire general public became terrified of fare evasion and the sudden consequences thereof. And we aren't writing enough tickets to do that. Instead, the only way to stop this $800 million a year problem for the MTA is to have a consequence that goes a little bit further. And although putting people in jail for fare evasion would definitely work, what might actually be more effective would be to have somebody who gets caught get a summons, which they have to pay, and require them to put in 10 hours of community service cleaning areas of the subway like this. They could wear a yellow vest, they could get a scrub brush, they could get to work, they could think about what they had done wrong, and everybody that comes down the stairs here would see them cleaning and making the subway better, and they would say to themselves, gee, if I don't want to do that, maybe I should just pay to take the train. What do you think about that? Let me know how the city could fix its subway. Let me know if Trump did the right thing by taking over Penn Station away from the people that are running this. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.